MAEKAN sessions are thematic online panel discussions hosted by MAEKAN, featuring guests from across creative culture. Sessions allow us to have longer, in-depth conversations on single topics with interesting people from around the globe. It's a format that is open for others to listen in and ask questions. In this MAEKAN session, we spoke with Sarah Kim and Ariel M. Myers, two of the three curators of Feminine Product, an art exhibition centered around the discussion of women and equality held in Los Angeles in March 2017. Sarah Kim, founder of By Way Of, has been featured in a previous MAEKAN story, Figuring Out Female Equality Together. Ariel M. Myers is a curator previously at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art and is now an independent curator located in Denver. We also invited two women whose work was included in the exhibition to speak with us. Carmen Chan, a professional commercial and editorial photographer, and Vanessa Yuri Chung, a visual artist and practicing arts educator. We discussed the need for all-women art shows and creative initiatives in response to a gender ratio imbalance in the arts world and a still changing societal attitude towards females. Another theme that came up was how feminism is defined differently by not only exhibition attendees, but the artists who were invited to exhibit. Ariel M. Myers brought up the importance of companies being mindful of a commitment to put money into their values and investing in diversity. Carmen Chan highlighted other women-specific initiatives and her experience with how some clients will thoughtfully consider whether the subject at hand might be better suited to be portrayed through a female gaze. We ended the session by talking about practical ways to nurture young creatives and encourage the community at large. Sarah Kim emphasized that there's enough room for everyone, female and male, and that bringing up new talent doesn't mean putting yourself in the shadows. As a heads up, there are a couple moments where a few of the guests didn't have a great connection, so the audio can be spotty in some areas. Okay, so since we're all here, do you guys want to get started?
Yeah.
Thank you for all being so on time. So we have people here, they're present, they can hear us, they can chat to us, right? This is the case. Oh, and for those who are tuning in, if you want to ask questions at any time, there is a Q&A button in the top right, and we'll be able to field them as we go along. So just to start off, I'm going to give a short explanation of MAEKAN. We're an audiovisual publication and community that features the sights and sounds of creative culture. We're currently membership-based, and you can sign up for a free trial at maekan.com. One thing we're really excited about is being able to host sessions like today's, and we get to just see more insight into aspects of the creative community. So we've invited 4 women who are each professionally involved in the creative industry in different ways. And how about we start with an introduction from each of the panelists? Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Sarah. I have a magazine called By Way Of, formerly By Way of Brooklyn, but then I moved to Los Angeles, so now it's By Way Of. And it is a magazine that features entrepreneurial women and the creative circles around them. So I'm the editor-in-chief there, and then we just hosted this amazing, can you say self-proclaimed amazing? Amazing our exhibition called Feminine Product, which Ariel curated, and then Carmen and Vanessa were a part of.
Ariel, do you want to go next?
I'm Ariel Myers. I'm a curator. I was at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art until about 2 months ago, and now I'm kind of working as an independent curator with a consulting firm in Denver called 9 Arts. And I'm doing like every type of project you can imagine: residences and hotels, and concept like visioning for new galleries. So like big picture stuff and kind of small stuff. So lots of cool things now.
Great. Vanessa?
Hi, I'm a visual artist and my practice focuses on drawing and painting, but I also am a practicing arts educator. I study fine arts and the visual and performing arts education at UCLA, and I've taught at several like Los Angeles elementary and middle schools, and I'm an upcoming graduate student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Ooh,
Nice.
Amazing.
5 days. 5 days.
Carmen?
Hi, I'm Carmen. I am a professional photographer. I've been shooting for about 7 years, and I shoot commercial and editorial work, specializing in lifestyle, fashion, and portraits, especially environmental portraits. And the Feminine Product was my first gallery show. So, thank you.
Awesome. So you guys kind of already mentioned it, and the reason that we brought four of you specifically together today is because Sarah and Ariel helped curate this show in LA this past March called Feminine Product, and Carmen and Vanessa were two of the exhibiting artists. So just to begin the conversation, can Ariel and Sarah talk about how you first came up with the idea?
yeah. So I make this magazine, and it took me a really long time to make our second issue, only because print costs money, a lot of money. And the only way that I could sort of get it sold in with our sponsors, who was Creative Rec Women's, who actually are making really good looking shoes, said they would do it, but we had to sort of have an event because people don't want to pay for events, and they don't. Not that they don't want to pay for print, but it's always like an addition versus being the main thing, which is my current struggle. So we said, we'll throw an event. And then Edison Chen, who was awesome, and is friends with my husband, his business partner, he has a beautiful space downtown that he's hosted lots of pop-ups at, lots of different events. And he offered it to me and our third curator, Lindsay, who's not here. But Lindsay, and so we went from there and we're like, well, what should we do? You know? For me to just have had a second issue launch party felt a bit like a waste of time and space. Like if we're going to get other people together, then we really wanted to do it in a way that was meaningful, you know? And I think that there are a lot of places that you go where you have a drink and you run into people, but there's not a lot of places where you have a conversation. Mm-hmm. So, you know, Lindsay and I were like, okay, let's have an art show. We're in an art gallery, you know, like let's have an art show here. And then like, we don't curate. Maybe we should bring on a curator. And then Ariel was like, ding. And I've known Ariel for years. So it was like for when she was studying to like when she was curating to like, man, we could tap her and this could be like this mutually beneficial thing. And then Ariel got involved.
Yeah, it's funny because I started like just trying to be around Sarah when I was like 18 or 19, living in New York, and like just saw that what she was doing with By Way Of and her goals towards what that might look like in the future was something that I really wanted to be involved with, and have written something in both print issues. And then so I guess didn't you call just to be like, I'm trying to do an art show, you're in the arts, what do you think? And I was like, I'm a curator now, that's what I do. And so it was a great moment of like, oh wow, we can actually like really work together and just like start putting together concepts of how we can set up the concept. Like, okay, we know we're starting with this level of it's going to be all women, but then like what bigger conversations are we having on top of that?
Yeah. And how did you, for Carmen and Vanessa, how was this pitched to you?
That's a great question.
I guess just friend of a friend. Sarah's graphic designer, Nari, is a, peer from UCLA, and she actually just, approached me and Sally, another, artist in the exhibit, and she said, I have this friend who's organizing a show, and I think your work would fit right in. And so connections, network. You know.
Well, it's also just like being the person that came into mind when you guys were having this theme, I guess. How about you, Carmen?
It was pitched to me by Sarah, and I've contributed to by way of previously in New York. And so she told me about the idea for this show, and like I mentioned, I usually shoot commercial and editorial, and so I don't have like specific personal work, but I think she kind of, it was nice because I think like Sarah and Ariel saw my work in a different way that I did. So she asked specifically for my body of work from Fashion Week, and we kind of extracted, I sent her a wider edit, and she, identified work that would, speak to that. So, yeah.
Artists that we really liked and didn't know them maybe, and just so it's kind of a cold call. And then we were able to identify artists who we weren't sure like if their work would like fit typically. Like I think for Carmen's, like I had seen so much of what she had shot for like Serial and like Everlane and Kinfolk, and all these beautiful places. But for her, I think in particular, it was like you shot all the behind the scenes from Fashion Week, and like these are all not moments that have been published. Like Women's Wear Daily wouldn't have published that shot, right? Mm-hmm. That behind the scene, or rolling up her stocking, or like fixing her fake eyelash, or getting her whatever it was, like the moment. So I think with people, friends, also, and artists that also hired, we're able to figure out what worked best.
So a question for all four of you is, why did you feel back in February or March that an all-women art show is necessary?
So probably I can answer that. So I mean, I was just thinking about, this interview yesterday night, and thinking about the definition of being a woman and just womanhood, and that definition in that meeting is, evolving and changing, like constantly and currently. And, even in February, we're still, seeing changes in that definition. And, this space was a space to showcase that, and the faces and the bodies and just the people involved in, creating visual, I guess, experiences of that womanhood.
Ariel, I think you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I come out of art history background. I have my master's in art history, and I was teaching and kind of had this plan to be a professor, and was on the trajectory for that. So, like, having this very academic background, you kind of study like historical exhibitions that have been only women, and kind of looking at where those exhibitions, like the role that they filled, but we couldn't do that exact same exhibition today, and it just wouldn't have the same resonance. Like trying to do Woman House today, it just wouldn't have the same feeling. And those are some conversations that Sarah and I had in the beginning, was like, trying to put ourselves in this framework of a pretty long history of women trying to work together, just women, to create a space that, brings to light the fact that even in most institutions, the ratio of men to women in exhibitions is just higher. And so it seems kind of counterintuitive sometimes to like carve out that space, because what we really want is equality. But I think, starting from that point of like, okay, well, where are we at right in this moment? And what can we do to make this show feel really relevant to the women that are working today? And what kind of needs do they have? What do they want to see out of a show?
Yeah.
There are enough things for boys. We already have enough. There's enough like shows, and like show implies like either, and you know what, we struggled too. It's like Lindsay, Ariel, and I too. I was like, do we have to make it so feminine? Do we have to say like female? Like, do you have to say that? And again, what Ariel said, like it's almost counterproductive. Sometimes you would think, like I had a friend Sam, and Sam was like, Sarah, like whenever I'm doing something, it's with all female DJs, I just look back and see that it happened to have been all female, versus like calling it that. And I was like, I think that we as creative women are maybe there, but I don't think we as sort of a society are there. So you have to, you have to sort of make that the tagline, I think, right now, not in the years to come, but now you can go to it. And like, I've had people also say about the magazine, like, oh, I didn't realize that this was like all female. Like you feature one guy in here and the rest are female. And I love that, you know, like it's, you read it, you like the imagery, like you love the words, but you wouldn't outwardly know. And I don't feel like we need to harp on it. But for something like this, that's so visual that God forbid we include a guy or two guys and like someone's work gets misconstrued or mislabeled, you know, like let's just make it very clear. Like this is for women.
I think that's where the title kind of like came in too, is we were like, well, we don't want to try to make it something that is overly feminine, but almost like attacks that idea. So, you know, it was like feminine product. It's like, it does harken to like, and even sometimes I'll see like in the hashtag on Instagram, like there's like things that are tagged under feminine product that are like literally about tampons. It does kind of like attack, you know, that idea that like everything feminine is going to be this like flowery, beautiful, like thing. And so I think we were like, okay, just going to go right for it.
Yeah. So one thing Sarah brought up is that you think that it continues to be necessary now, but then hopefully in sometime in the future, it won't be necessary. So would you say that you foresee in these next couple of years that we still need to be doing all women initiatives? And when can we stop doing that?
I don't know.
I think we will have to be doing all women initiatives for, I guess it's a personal thing, right? Like if you don't feel as if, you know, that's not an issue for you, maybe let's say, or for, you know, the friend that felt like, you know, I'm hiring enough people where I don't need to say it's neither here nor there, female or male, like more power to you. But for me and what we were doing, I think it makes it much easier to carve that out and like to say it. And then there's a movement behind it very quickly. So I feel like to be a feminist right now is a bit trendy, which I'm all for the trend, right? But I would be curious in the years to come, maybe after our president is out, you know, and whatnot, like what that would look like, right? So do we need to continue to have these things? I think until you personally feel that, like Carmen, I wonder, you know, like I'm a female photographer, you know, like Venus is the greatest female tennis player of all time. You know, it's like how long do we need to be saying these things? I don't know actually what the answer to that is. It's I think until I feel it, you know, because to me it was so obvious that it was going to be all women versus like let's not like. I think the title maybe was what we had toyed with a bit, but the fact that it needs to be all women, that was set. You know, that was no matter.
Got it.
I don't know until I feel otherwise, I guess, and until people personally feel, women personally feel otherwise. You know, some women already feel that way, and others don't.
I think.
Go for it.
I think go. You know, until all of the like, I guess identities that make up woman, you know, trans women, women of color, undocumented women, and etc. Like until they have spaces within, you know. It'll still be necessary because we're still not including everyone. It has to, you know, we have to have these inclusive spaces. So, you know, these initiatives, these art shows, these spaces that are all women are still evolving. And so I think they're still necessary.
Question for Carmen and Vanessa. Carmen mentioned that this was your first show. And I'm wondering if since March, you guys have kind of sought out to be part of more things that are similar to like this, or now when you evaluate collaborating with people, you keep in mind the possibility of something being, having a stronger stance to it.
Vanessa, you can go.
Oh. Okay. I mean, I think, you know, this show, a lot of our friends came, a lot of my friends came out, and it was kind of a spark and dialogue about just these spaces. You know, Sarah and I met a couple times after, and a lot of the conversations we had were still around being a woman in the industry, you know, and we were able to refer back to this show. And so if that was a conversation we had, you know, just to think of other people who came to the show on a whim or just because they stopped by. You know, I actually am a part of this group, this collective called Asian Mamas in the Arts, working in the arts. And it was kind of, you know, something that I thought about after the show where, you know, we need these spaces, these, you know, very intentional spaces that are kind of platforms for dialogue that we have and we can have every day, you know. And so, yeah.
Actually going out and doing these kinds of shows is a big thing too, especially like, again, just like my experience coming out of the academy. Like we talk a lot about it and we read a lot of like theory and whatever, and we have these kind of like utopian ideals of what it might look like when, you know, women of color and trans women and all these like kind of hyphenated, you know, versions of what we imagine womanhood being, you know, until all of those identities are represented. And that's something that's talked about a huge deal, but until like there are people who are going out and just continuing to produce more content, continuing to produce more shows and more occasions, more events, that we're getting together and actually having dialogue about these things. You know, that's like the biggest thing, is like creating that footprint where, you know, somebody else can walk in that and creating like a pattern of doing it, and, you know, just thinking about it and talking about it and like, what do those spaces look like, and imagining them. That's very powerful. But until we actually are, you know, establishing a pattern of doing it, I don't think it's going to be.
It's not time to stop yet.
Right. We need to move closer towards that.
Yeah. So both Vanessa and Ariel, you guys have kind of hit on these conversations that were started as a result of the show in March. And one of my questions is, what was the reception you got from putting this on? Like positive or negative or confusion, anything that you received?
It's literally all been positive.
That's amazing.
You know, because these spaces don't really exist as much. And every time they come up or they're created, people embrace it. And I think Sarah, Ariel, and Lindsay did a great job in including, you know, different groups of people, and they're really mindful of that. I remember a conversation that we had in my apartment when they first kind of came to a studio visit, about including, you know, women of color specifically, being intentional of doing that. And then that carried out in the conversations that we had after the show. You know, yeah.
And we were really trying to achieve that without tokenizing people. Like, like, oh, we have a box to check. We need a Black artist from New York and a Black artist from LA. We need a white artist from New York and a white artist from LA. It starts to feel like really silly when you start to put it in those terms, but it was really just sprung out of like finding people, choosing work that we liked, and then really dialoguing about like working towards the aim.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have any examples of public feedback that weren't from friends and family? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I had a few, like, we were there on Saturday and Sunday. So opening night was Friday night, and then Saturday and Sunday, we held it through the weekend. And it was, you know, you expect like your friends and family to join, and that's fine and like come through. But I think we had people who had seen it on Instagram or wherever they had seen it. And like, there's someone who's a school teacher in like Echo Park, and it's like, she teaches like violin to all these students, like dance and take orchestra. And felt like something like that was really, I keep breaking up, don't I?
Just a little bit. I can mostly get it.
Okay. Yeah. It was really cool to see other people that we didn't know and how they had shown up, or to have people who had followed the artists for so long come through and get to see them, because they might have not been able to have their own show, maybe didn't want to, but then being included a part of a bigger show. It was really interesting to see people who had come that we didn't know, like friends who were actually much more encouraging. I don't know, it's because they don't know our story. They haven't seen us try and fail or what. It was really cool for people to be like, hey, there needs to be more of this. How often? Yeah. I was like, you know what? Not that often. We'll do it again soon.
How are people interacting with the work? Did questions come up as a result of the work? Because some of the work, Eugene has been showing it as we talk. It's not some of it's approachable and some of it is less approachable.
Prime example.
Yeah.
Dirty dishes. Yeah.
Jasmine Barnes, who is a poet, and we put some of her kind of like smaller fragments of poems. We used vinyl to put them on the ground.
Yeah. We used it in one of our promos.
Yeah. I think that piece was really, really powerful. I think because of not just, I mean, her words are super powerful, but the placement and like thinking about how people interacted with it as a visual art piece, like pushing it beyond, because she's kind of working like a visual artist in a way, because she does take her words and make like these large installations with them. And so that was one of the really interesting ones to see how people interacted with it, because, you know, some of them were like inspiring, some of them were controversial, and just kind of watching how people move through the space. And like, you know, some people really treated the words on the floor like they were these holy objects, like just like clustering around them, reading them with the people that they came with. And then other people were just like walking right over them, didn't even really notice, or like stopped to take like a cute shoe selfie, and then were like, okay, bye. And then, you know, that was one of the pieces that I think really lived on online. Like people were really posting that, reacting to that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that kind of was one where the reception was really interesting, just to see how different people were consuming that particular piece of work.
I think too, it was interesting to see. Well, you guys didn't see the work on the back end, but it was like me, Ariel, and Lindsay like fighting about which pieces should be included and not. And like the three of us are very different, just as we have to, like Lindsay's the one that did dirty dishes, Ariel's a curator, and then I'm like a magazine editor, right? I'm an editor. And so it was really tough, I think, even amongst us to decide what was going to be added into the show. And some of the work, like one curator felt really strongly about, and the other two were like, you feel strong about it? All right. You know, where some of, you know, and vice versa. So I think it was interesting to see the reception for some of those more controversial pieces, like Lindsay's Dirty Dishes, let's say, for example, or Jasmine Mann's, there's one, what was it? Don't have sex with the guy that won't eat you out first. Right? Are we really going to include that? Or are we not going to include that? Like, what does it mean if we don't include it? You know, and just going through this whole internal, like, mental and emotional, and then having to speak with her about why she felt like it was so important to include it, you know, and it was for her. And I don't know if she would still stand by this when we had talked about it, it's what she stood by, but she said, in the porn industry, you always expect a girl to go down on a guy first before they do anything. And it's not the other way around. And I was like, So she's like, even down to porn, like, why are we as women, you know, like, it was just so interesting. And that was when we had talked about it, that was her sort of explanation for that quote. And I was like, you know what, let's include it, you know? And so
totally sold that to us, because I mean, we were thinking about it just on the level of like, trying to be inclusive, we wanted to make sure that the show was something that a mom could bring her daughter to. And so we were like, we have young girls in here. Is this a conversation that maybe like a parent might not want to have right at this very moment? But then on the other hand, the way that Jasmine was explaining it to us, we were like, okay, so maybe it is a conversation, maybe not for the 6-year-old, but like for people our have. And so maybe it's worth including for that reason. So she like definitely sold us on that. And I think a lot of that happened was like that internal dialogue between Lindsay and Sarah and I really kind of changed each other's minds about work that if it was just us doing it may or may not have included. I think it was a really like generative process, actually.
I think too, that there are lots of conversations that happened, and like half of them we'll never know, obviously. But I think it's also like like my husband and I, Alex, we made that shirt that Carmen's wearing, the girls, the gun
t-shirt. Way to rep.
Hand down.
Oh.
Hey.
It's reversed.
Oh, so good. And it was interesting because it's like, where does this intersect? Like, can we have, you know, a company, like a t-shirt brand that's not female run, you know, like be a part of it? Yeah, absolutely. But what does it look like for it to make sense for that person and then for what we're doing. And I think that was with every artist. And then additionally, like what conversation sort of trickled out from there. Like, I think that there are lots of, like, I'm still getting to talk about it in LA. Like, I've had people come up to me that I didn't know, which is wild for them to be like, hey, you're the one that did that art show, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I think the first step is like, I haven't been to a meaningful event in a really long time like that. And then second is like that the art was great, you know, or like I really appreciated it, or I hadn't thought of it like that. So it was warm, yeah. Outside of like,
no, that's really positive. I did partially ask that question, wondering if there had been like negative pushback, but this is even more encouraging than what I was expecting.
There was negative pushback during when we were talking with artists, for sure.
There were artists that didn't want to participate because they like weren't really sure on the format, and so we had to kind of do that process of reframing, like to make sure that, because they kind of brought concerns to us that we maybe hadn't thought of, and so it was really helpful to have feedback. But it was also hard at times because we constantly were doing that process of like checking ourselves, like questioning our own motives. Like, is what we're trying to do by having the show creating more like conversation in the right way? Are we like pushing forward something that is worth talking about, or are we taking advantage of people? And like we had to really check ourselves a couple of times to make sure that. And in the end, I think we struck a good balance, which was like, we know we've considered all of this stuff. So if there is negative feedback, I mean, that's something we can learn from, but we know that we thought about it and know that these things, it's like we're ready for whatever that might look like. But I think it's overwhelming.
Carmen and Vanessa, were those some of your concerns? Like when you were approached about this, like did you want to make sure that Ariel, Lindsay, and Sarah had certain intentions that were in line with your own?
I think when I read the brief, and also just like trusting, you know, Sarah's eye and the curators, and just knowing that they would put together something that would, I mean, I think knowing Sarah personally kind of helped, kind of as far as, you know, me not really being concerned about how it would turn out or like the context of it all. And I think the amazing thing is like going into it, like you said, like the conversations that were started as a result of the curation that happened. And so I know Sarah mentioned before that like they tried really hard for it not to be, or just like being aware that it wasn't like in your face, that there was a lot of like for it to be too vulgar or too like feminist or anything. I think you know, it could have gone a lot of different ways, but the way that it ended up as far as the curation is concerned, it is just like, and for it to be an all women's show, I think there were specific conversations, or you know, the context of the work, the way that it was sequenced and the way that, you know, you viewed it. I think there were certain conversations that came up that were only a result of that specific, you know, situation and context, and like, you know, selection of artists and selection of work, and just to be able to think about women in that way, or like the voices that were there, you know, like the experience that only women specifically will have. I think if it was, you know, a co-ed show, or I don't know, if the curation went in a different direction, then like the conversations would be really different. And so, I mean, as far as being worried about the way that my work is placed amongst the others, I mean, I wasn't worried about it personally. I just trusted them, and I gave them my work, and I was like, okay, I know like you're trying to, you know, initiate specific conversations. And so I kind of like let them do that.
I think so what Carmen's saying is the best example that we had. Because in my dream world, that's how it happens. It's like, I know the person that I'm working with always, right? But to have a 16 female like artist show, we didn't know a lot of the artists we reached out to, and some of them were just like straight fangirls, you know, like and like cold call, Instagram DM, like the whole thing. And so with Carmen's example, that was the best case scenario. Vanessa's like mid-level in there because it's their friend of a friend, so there's still that cosign, right? But there's a few artists that we had reached out to that, and I'm going to make it confidential right here, right now. We didn't pay anyone to be part of the show.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest like hardest, I think, gripe, especially because we had a sponsor for the show. And the sponsor for the show was essentially paying for the magazine, which launched and was the reason for the show. So internally, that was my whole mental breakdown that I shared with the curators and with the artists. And there were some artists that really had a problem with it, which I get, right? So one artist was, she emailed me an Ariel back saying, like, my example of feminism says that women should be paid for their work, and it was like, really jarring for me and Ariel because we're like, we agree. Our example of feminism says that too.
Like we would love to pay you, and we would pay you before we pay ourselves. And it's just like, man, we want to work in that. We want to be part of that creative economy that's equitable for people, for women, right? But that,
yeah, actually, we have a question from an attendee right now, Alvin G, that's totally relevant to what we're discussing. And he asks, what were some examples of concerns artists brought up that helped guide your process?
Yeah, so it was that. And I think that was the biggest one, was like, are we paying these women to be a part of it? And then it's been in my periphery, and she actually wasn't a part of the show. So now it's like this constant, hey Vanessa, it's this constant,
I just cringe.
In the back of should we not be doing it if we're not able to pay people? Is that irresponsible?
I mean, my experience as an artist, like that you approached, I felt like, okay, doing it once. We had a conversation about it, like I was on board as soon as you guys, left my apartment after this like long and intense conversation about your intentions and what your vision was for the show. Once that was clear, and once you guys were pretty transparent with the entire thing, and that was an example of what good kind of negotiation was for women working together. And we were just trying to build something that was empowering, and that was this open and honest space. That was just like okay, I'm down.
Yeah. Was the challenge not being able to pay some artists, and that is where, and then not being able to meet with some of the artists, because I think that it's like you're able to sniff out, like, people are it's so easy to read people, I think, these days, especially if you're an artist or you're creative, like that whole, and I felt like she was confusing me with someone who says, like, hey, we have no budget, but it's great for your portfolio, like, hey, it's great for exposure, like that classic, like, freelance line. But then we were saying it really meant it, actually,
Yeah.
And I think that if you don't know me, and the other thing I'll say about the artist, and again, let's take it there. We're here. She was a color as well, and so I think Ariel and I immediately, pretty defensive. If she knew us, like, she would know that, like, this, like, she doesn't get it, and like XYZ, and then we had sort of had to take a step back, and like, she must have been burned, like, before, or she must have been taken advantage of, as we all have, enough times in order for her to respond this way, or she's just not down, which is fine too.
We were trying to be upfront and transparent. We felt like, if she only knew us and she only knew what we were trying to achieve, like, maybe, she wouldn't be upset. And then we started to think more about it, like, maybe that it's really actually good that there are women who are really standing up for their ethics in business. Because, like, to be an artist, you have to also have like a certain business savvy, and you have to draw a line sometimes. And it applies to everything. Like, I've done a lot of like really shitty unpaid internships, and to get to the career that I have, I felt like I had to do that. And I wish I didn't have to do it, because I wish I could have been paid for my work. And I hope that when I'm in a position of power, to be hiring interns, that I'm going to do that in a different way. But, I thought it was actually great to see her draw a hard line and say, this is my fee for group shows, and that's just the way that I'm working. And, I commend her for that, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for also just sharing this open-minded respect for like the way other people might approach an all-woman show. Yeah, like what I get from you is that, you did it this way, and that was true to the three of you, but there are obviously other ways that other women might approach it. And actually, since Sarah already brought it there is a hard question I wanted to ask, which is there a difficult experience that you can remember as a female creative that particularly highlighted what makes it hard to be a female in the creative industry? I know it's a black place.
Yeah, right. Well, I think no, I'm not going to start.
Start.
Someone else knows. No,
I can see Carmen laughing even if we can't hear her.
So I think for me, it is playing into the stereotype that people expect me to. And that's been really hard for me. So it's like, I'm already not a business person. I hate talking about money. I hate it. And so then to like go into business meetings, let's say, and to be sort of this like meek, like Asian American, like female who maybe isn't as assertive, and like, you're going to be able to talk me down and I'm going to say, okay, you know, and it's so silly. I've been called out for saying like, thank you too much. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can say thank you. I can be grateful. Like, that's okay. But it's so odd that like it comes off as this like almost apologetic, you know, and it happens at work, you know, like I work at an agency that's New York based, and I'm the only person in LA. So I'm like, I'm just so thankful, you know, whatever. And they're like, you don't have to say that, you know, or it's really interesting. I'm trying to think of where else, like.
Actually, Sarah, since you've sort of hinted on it by saying Asian American, we have a question from an attendee, Sue Kim, and she says, specifically for you, have you explored Korean feminism at all? There seems to be a movement that's growing, and wanted to get thoughts.
So it's interesting. Korean feminism, interestingly, I think I've talked to Vanessa a lot about it, more than anyone else, because they have a group called Asian Mamas, which I was like, this is dope. So in my mind, I think for me, it's like the same thing as being a woman, then add that layer of being Korean American woman to it, right? It's like, does it have to be, do I need to make like something that has like hunger on it, which is like Korean, you know, symbols? Like, does it have to be that? Or is there a way to do it that's not like so Korean, I guess? Like, you know, and I think that's the same thing about being a female. Like, am I doing it in a way that's like, am I pushing it all the way there? Or am I like, I can play with the guys, you know, like I'm cool. So I think it makes it a bit of an odd like place to, and I think for me, for you, Sue, like it was really hard for me to like realize that this is a whole nother talk, but I'm not Korean enough, and yet I'm not white enough. Right? I'm not Korean, but I'm not like American enough. So it's been this interesting like middle space to play. And then getting to talk to Vanessa about it after having had the show and meeting her and Sally, who now have this group called Asian Mamas. Suddenly it's so interesting for me to explore within the context of what they're doing. Oh, like they did that in a way that didn't seem so, I guess, like Korean in quotes, and not knowing what that means for me, even exploring what that means and seeing the way that they're able to sort of dissect it and translate it visually. And I'm like, wow, I hadn't thought to do it that way, or I hadn't thought that I would have resonated with something like that. So I might let Vanessa go in there, slide in.
I mean, I think the work is inherently tied to my identity as an Asian American woman, right? And so the conversation is there whether or not it's brought up, just because of the work, you know, straight itself is made by an Asian American woman. And one thing that we try to keep in mind when we're, you know, creating these spaces, whether it's Asian Mamas or talking to Sarah and a couple other friends, is, you know, yes, we have this identity, but also how are we using it? How are we creating it? How are we making it inclusive for, you know, marginalized Asian women? So Southeast Asian women or trans Asian women, you know, just like really pushing the envelope to be beyond, you know, so insular, beyond such a like homogenous thing, you know, and then integrating that into our conversations, I think is just kind of like an example of what feminism should be, this dialogue, this ongoing dialogue that is transformed when other people are introduced, when, you know, other groups are involved.
Because I want to be aware of our time, I kind of want to ask you guys questions that are beyond the show and sort of
Yeah.
about being a female creative in general and where you think the future is going to sort of head. So a question I have is, do you have practical solutions in mind regarding the price gap and representation gap for female creatives and male creatives? I think Ariel mentioned this earlier as well about like, because I know you're a curator and you work in that field of putting on shows and the ratio is really off, right? So what is a real way that we can change that?
Well, I mean, it's like an interesting model because there's just like such a massive separation between these kind of like pop-up events or things that are going on in the culture that are like younger and more like running on no budget and doing all that. And I see like a lot of progress going on in that field, like at a more local level. But we still just like haven't caught up institutionally. So like when we're talking about like big galleries, like blue chip galleries or museum shows, solo shows for women, like the numbers between like 1985, the number of shows, I think there was like one like female
retrospective
one woman show in 1985, and there were 4 in 2015, and that's between Guggenheim, Met, Modern, and Whitney. So it's kind of like between 1985 2015 we only added 3 shows for women. It's like things that are just really discouraging, but at the same time, like I see so much progress at this local level and in a younger generation. And so I think as, you know, people who are our age, like rise into kind of like upper level management or curatorial positions, things like that, I see a lot of hope that these things can change. And I think it takes shows, like more grassroots kind of things like this to move the needle a little bit. And another huge part of the problem is the market too, so buying. And that's something, you know, now working in a new capacity, doing kind of like a more consulting role. As I'm working on projects, I'm really, really mindful to like look at where my dollars are going to go. Like how much dollars for this project are going to female artists versus male artists, people of color versus white people. Like it's just important to be really critical of the way that we're spending our money. Because that creates a creative economy. And without the creative economy, like, for example, if Carmen didn't make money doing commercial photography, she probably wouldn't be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do this fine art exhibition, even though I'm not getting paid for it, right? She might do it anyway, because my point is just that it's harder for women to, you know, be in a position to be financially stable and also have an art practice. So if we're spending our dollars in a smart way, you know, we can really support women to make the work that they want to make. And if we're not putting our money where our values are, then it's just not going to be possible for us. So it's important to really be mindful of that, as well as like at the institutional level, what we can do.
Yeah, actually, since you brought up Carmen and getting paid as a commercial photographer, I was wondering if Carmen and Vanessa, as photographer and an artist, you think about when you quote, whether there's a difference in your quote between what a male photographer or a male artist might be asking. Does that factor into your decisions?
I don't really think about it that way, and I know that there's a huge disparity between the number of male photographers and female photographers. And I did want to mention, like Eugene brought this up too in the MAEKAN Slack channel. There's this website that was created recently by a female photographer. It's womenphotograph.com. And they have, I can't remember how many people they have listed, but it's hundreds of women now who have over 5 years of photojournalism experience. And it's basically a push and a huge roster of women all over the world, kind of a resource for editors and art buyers to specifically hire women photographers. And the body of work is incredible. And I think something like that is amazing. And they're also, you know, gifted like a grant and scholarship to a few photographers to support their practice and their projects. And they also have a mentorship program. So I think things like that are definitely, you know, a move in the right direction. Personally, I don't think about that. And I don't know that when I work with producers and people that I hire out to help me put together estimates, I don't think when they quote that there's a difference between, I think they just look at the body of work, and they create fees based on the, based on your talent and what you're providing. And I think the fees for editorial are not different as far as I know. When I speak to fellow male photographers, they give me advice too, and as far as I know, like there's no difference there. I think the biggest difference is the maybe just what's out there in the market, like Ariel said. And so it's for art buyers and editors to make a bigger effort to support female photographers, and also be aware that the vision and the results that you're going to get from female is going to be different. So I think, I know that what they do consider is, that's why they do portfolio meetings, is they want to meet the photographer in person, so that, say for example, there's a very, sensitive subject that needs to be covered, or, person who needs to be photographed, and to hire a female photographer because they know that they're going to be more suitable for that job. And so I think, those things need to be considered. And even like going into Fashion Week, I think the stuff that I'm going to capture is going to be a lot different from what a male photographer is going to capture. And like, the male gaze, I think, is very different from the female gaze, and like sensitivity and the way that even you interact with the models backstage. I think, I don't know if I'm being, partial or like stereotyping, but I would like to think, and especially like seeing and experiencing what it's like backstage, I would like to think that I am more sensitive to their situation, just like to their situation, innate as the female.
I mean, speaking on what Carmen said about kind of the approach to, being sensitive, on the other hand, as an artist, as a young artist, and just beginning to price my work and thinking about how, this is a business too, I do have to consider, what like my value is, I guess, the value of the work, and such. And then thinking about like installation and having, people approach me when I'm trying to install a piece, like, oh, do you need help? Whereas, a guy who has this huge sculpture would never be, asked that. Like, I can handle my own work. I know how to install the work that I've created. You don't need to hire someone else. Whereas that question would never be asked to a guy who's, a male identifying person who's installing their work, and then having that be considered when you're, in the process of negotiating prices. Like, oh, we have to hire this person to help you install, but that shouldn't have had come up anyway.
Yeah. I have some very practical ways. I feel like someone brought it up to me, and this is not creative at all, but it's like finding, for me, someone said, oh yeah, I have a doctor who's a female, and like my optometrist and whoever else I go to are female doctors or female physicians or big or whatever it is, like that you can choose to go to, and supporting women run things or businesses. I think second to that too, it's interesting. I do a lot of influencer marketing at the agency that I work at, and oftentimes women don't ask for more money. Period. Men always ask for more. And if I have more, I'll give them more. But if you as a female are not asking me for more, I can't give you more. So I'm not just going to say like, because I have to make my budget, right? As someone who's then like making sure this budget is right. So it's interesting now when I'm talking to friends who are like influential in whatever way, shape, or form, like ask for more. Yeah. Or make sure you're not like, what are you asking for? Like, let's talk rates. Like, let's just go there. Like, if we're close enough, that's way under budget. Don't do that. Right. So I think being on like the marketer side, like in terms of like my own agency work. Right. And then for me, it's this whole, like, it's this weird, like Robin Hood thing, it's like, if I'm able to do work, like passion project work and with anyone, right, then how can I get this artist who I believe in, like, paid on this next like advertising thing that I'm doing, or how can I include them as a photographer we should work with, right? Versus the list of the people that we usually go to. When can I insert this person at the right moment, right? Yeah. An artist collab, like, I have 16 female artists that we could potentially work with, right? So, so I think it's being just with the know-how and the experience that I've had, and like sharing that with the people I can share it with. Like brands have money to spend. You know, it's interesting. I can't get my magazine paid for, but I can like tell my influencer friends how much they should be charging. You know, but if I know that just that fact alone, like most women do not ask for more, you know, or do you need a manager? You know, like, would it be easier for you to ask for more to get a manager? Our friend Tara, who was a part of the show too, she just had a show in New York, and her friends came through the night before her show and repriced everything to much higher, and everything sold. You know, and like maybe it's I think it's a few things. Like you have to know what you're trying to achieve, who you have time for, and how to carve out like solutions with the person too. You know, I don't think you can like save the world, you know, but I think in as much as you can do in that day with as much wisdom as you have to do what you feel like is possible and making a difference, I think. So it's whether I can get a friend paid, you know, whose work obviously speaks for itself. That to me feels great. Or if I know someone's working with a big brand and they're not charging enough, I'm like, yo, charge way more, charge double that next time, you know, because I can say that now with my experience, right? Or finding a female doctor, like, so I can pay her versus paying, like my sister is a doctor and is going through a whole different thing of like struggling in residency and what it looks like to be a female doctor versus a male doctor. And I'm like, this conversation's happening everywhere, you know, like, how do we push it forward and how do we make decisions without feeling overwhelmed by what's at hand, you know, and making daily decisions in our own life that we can, or is there a conversation that you could take to the next level or be like, hey, what do you mean by that actually?
Yeah, you know? Actually you've gone perfectly into the next question I had, which is what are some practical things that you can do to foster young female artists, curators, photographers, creatives of all kinds? I know that some of you have taught in the past or are currently teaching. Are these, besides education, like which is you can talk about, but what are other things that we can do to help young girls who want to be in this industry?
I have a really good one, actually. I was thinking about this morning. Like I was thinking about art history and that path and like how I kind of got there and how I got here and all these things. And I remember when I was finishing undergrad, applying for grad school, I asked a female professor of mine. Actually, all my letter writers were female professors. And I asked one of them to write a letter for me. And her response was like, yes, I will definitely write a letter for you because you've done good work, but I want you to know something before you apply to grad school. And that is that art history is a really difficult, or, you know, academia in general, is a really difficult path for women. And she was like, why do you think it is that all the girls, like all the people in your classes are girls? It's like 85% girls, but all the administration, all the professors are men. She was like, because like women's careers will always come second to men. Like when you want to have children, you're going to have to readjust your expectations. You're going to have to take time off of work. Your career is going to suffer. Your tenure, you're not going to get tenure till later, blah, 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 all these things. Yeah. Like, I just want you to have that piece of information going forward. I just want you to know that this is what you're entering into. And I was like shook to the ground by that, first of all. And then second of all, I just was like, do I even want this person to write me a letter now if she's already like questioning my judgment in choosing this career path? And so I think of that very often when I'm thinking about mentorship, because I think it's a huge, important piece of our role as women is to mentor other. Yeah. And so my answer to that is, for example, when I was installing exhibitions at the museum, I would always get interns to help me. And I would use that as an opportunity to talk to them about their goals and talk to them about what they imagine themselves doing and what connections do I have? Like, who can I get them a lunch date with so they can hang out and ask their questions to somebody? And like, we all have had like both the positive and the negative version of that, which is like somebody telling you like, you can't do it, but also somebody telling you, I'm here to support you and ask questions. Like Sarah has been that for me in a lot of ways. We have different careers, but I always like have always bounced stuff off of her. Only being a few years older than me, but it's still been super helpful. So I think that's like a huge part of our job right now as creative women is to go out and find younger creative women and tell them, hey, it's going to be difficult, but I know people and you know people and you have a great eye or great abilities. And like together we can make this happen. We can change the discussion around this. It doesn't always have to, the demographics don't always have to look the way they look. Like, we have the ability to change that.
So creating pipelines between, younger artists and older artists, and, creating clear, paths of communication. So, even this conversation where we're talking about negotiating, prices for your work, or talking about these important issues, or, misogyny in the workplace, you're encouraging women to kind of explore that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question that just came through, anonymous attendee. How much time are you willing to devote to help bring up young talent? My mentor is actually not a female; he's a male, and his name's Evan Kubernick, and he started like Slam Double XL 0 to 60. I worked at a men's magazine called Antenna with him for a number of years. His whole thing was he would always try and bring in new talent. Always, always, always. Like, the art director at GQ now is Evan met him when he was an intern in college, right? So there's always going to be this threat that someone's going to be better than you. I think I'm actually supremely confident that there are a lot of people who are better than me at making magazines, but I have my own perspective, and that's what I ride on. So to bring up new talent to me, and I saw this by example through Evan, it only helps my cause, because it's this like influencer thing too. It's like, I am not going to be the be all end all. I don't need to be. My magazine doesn't need to be. But if I can continue to be that person who's putting other people on, then I become that curator of that person. Like, oh, Sarah knows the young talent who's coming up, or Sarah actually is really confident about putting other people on. Like, we should probably tap her. And then that's like my fee. Like, how much but am I charging you to like tap me for those contacts? But for the most part, I think that you being nervous about putting other people on, and then that hindering you fostering into other people, it shows insecurity. One, I'll start there. You need to be confident in your own work. And if you don't have maybe the time to pour into other people, then you should be focusing on your own work, and getting to a place where you're more secure about that work, maybe, and feel confident enough to be able to share like your challenges and your failing. And I think also my vision is this like sort of greater good, or like greater goal, and what it would look like to push this creative conversation forward. Like, as we're doing now, like, this feels like a step, right?
Yeah.
Or is my goal to like make a lot of money making a magazine? If it was, I would make a magazine, right? And then do X, Y, and Z and get my name out there, right? I think it starts with your goal, right? So if my goal is to try and push this creative conversation, this landscape forward, and include women and men, right? People who are the right fit, then I'm going to continue to pour into people, right? And still be confident about my own work, and make time for my work, and then also make time for those people. So I can say, hey, remember, like Madberry Club, for example, if you guys know who they are, who I adore. I gave them their first print article at Antenna when they were under 21 years old. And like I feel like they'll always remember that. Like, they always bring it up, whenever I'm around them and with them. But they're crushing it, And so, like, I don't have any threats about that. They're phenomenal, right? Like, there's enough room for everyone. And I think when I had very first started my magazine, I was very like, I wouldn't do it like that. And then all these other female magazines that are coming out, I don't want to do it. And Evan Kubernick was just like, there's enough room. One, and it only helps if there's more. Two, and three, it's not your perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you guys all know the same people, you guys know them differently, right? Whoever's making XYZ other female, there's a ton of beautiful female print, like focused magazines out, just print in general, right? So I think it comes from like what your goal is. One, my goal is to help foster this creative community and like make it wider, and whatever that looks like for me in this season. There are seasons where I've spread myself too thin, and I felt like there were definitely people who were getting hired for the job that I was recommending but before me. And I had to reassess, like, is my work not on point enough? Am I then only being seen as a person who's able to put other people on when I'm not helping myself, right? So can I suggest myself for that thing versus that other person, right? So I think it's assessing what your goal is, assessing what season you're in to do what, and then going from there. I think it takes a really confident person to pour into other people, to talk about their struggles and to save that person from that stress. Because if that photographer makes it faster, and then feels indebted to you or like can harken back or, whatever that is, that feels much more important to me.
Yeah. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time because I do know that it's 1 EST now, but we have a couple of audience questions. So is it okay if you stick around for a little bit?
Yes, please.
Everyone cool? I know Ariel's at work, so let me know if you need a hop. Let's go with Connor M. said he's actually addressing something we talked about a while back. Can you guys can see the questions if you click into Q&A at the bottom. He's addressing something we talked a bit back about being Asian American and being female and also possibly Asian American for some of us, and having people perceive us a certain way. So how do we as women walk a tightrope of being strong, independent, and intelligent without appearing to other people as seemingly too aggressive when we're talking about our work? And I think he's talking about like, how do we be true to ourselves while battling what some people come with? Like some people will come with their perception of us. And do we feel the need to like adjust?
I know
Sarah's like, no.
It's like a Donald Trump supporter, right? Let's say, like, I'm not going to sway you neither here nor there, but I'm going to like use my personality and like who I am to voice my opinion, right? So like, Connor, I hear your question. I understand. And like what you're saying, I did say like two feminists, right? And so I think it's interesting. That means so many different things to so many different people. Or Vanessa, it could mean a completely different thing than it does for Mario. We're all in the same show together, right? So for me, it's like, whatever that means for me, I want to be able to bridge a gap to have a conversation. And again, it's like, it starts with what your goal is, right? Like our goal was to open up dialogue for this conversation. Yeah. It wasn't to like, take that, guys, it wasn't that. Or like equal pay now. Then that's what the show would have been called, right? It felt much more, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, because it all depends on your level of like temperament, I guess. Mild, I would say. Like I think it could have been much more aggressive. But we're trying to have a conversation. We're just trying to offend or not offend. Right? I'm not like not trying to offend anyone, but I'm also like not trying to throw it in your face, right?
I mean, yeah.
So it's totally up to, like, I think every woman here would answer differently. And for me, it's about having a conversation with someone to be able to not persuade them, but change their just perspective a little bit, or just change out that lens. Or
I mean, that shouldn't be our job. We shouldn't even have to talk about being too aggressive or too mild, The thing that, like, people talk about this all the time, if a woman is stronger, she's called a bitch or whatever. If a man is doing that as a boss, he's a boss or whatever. Sorry, that could have been put much more eloquently. But in the same way, we shouldn't have to worry about being too aggressive or too mild. It should just be taken as what it is, and the fact that Sarah has to defend, this kind of like situation, it's ridiculous, I think.
But also, like, certainly there are women who probably like look at what they're doing and are like, it's not far enough, right? And like, I think that's a really valid opinion too. And like, what we were, trying to do is like not put forward our own agendas necessarily, but just create a space where people could have that conversation and like meet each other wherever they were at. And I know, like in MAEKAN Slack channel, Eugene has brought up a couple of times, like, okay, but like, what are the tactics that I can use? Like, I'm trying to be a good man, trying to be like feminist as a man, and like, what do I do? How do I like enter the conversation? And I think that's a huge, huge, huge part of what we were trying to do, is to say, look, we can't tell you how that's going to look for you, but we want you to like enter into this space, listen to what people are saying, look at the work, try to put yourself into the mindset of the women who are making it work. And you enter in there, and then you do from there what feels right to you. You like make that a part of your economy, like how you spend your money. You make that part of how you speak about women's work. You make that, part of just what you observe as being part of those conversations. So it was like about creating a space, and like the idea of like two feminists, right? Like I feel like I interpret that more from like agendas sometimes. But I don't think this was like an agenda pushing show, or like, I mean, we certainly all have our own feminist agendas. Like we were saying earlier about the female artist who told us like, well, my feminism says this. Well, we all have a version of that. My feminism says X. And so I think, that's a person to person conversation. Whereas like with the show, it was intended to be more of like, you're getting a slice, you're getting in a room with a lot of people with a lot of different opinions.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a question from an attendee, Stanley, that does speak to what you were saying about Eugene, asking about what he can do, or constantly questioning, like, what is a man practically to do in this situation? And the question is about us in saying that there needs to be more all-women initiatives. The question is, would it be more productive to convince the so-called people in power, whether they're male or not, is to use a more holistic approach? I think the idea is like, if we convince women first, then we have to go ahead and then like as a unit, as all womankind, to convince men. So would it be easier to just like include men from the get-go?
I think what that kind of sounds like, or the idea of like, we have to first convince the people in power, or that we have to make the people in power part of the conversation, like a bit like kind of trickle down economics. Like, oh, well, if we just convince the museum directors, then they'll definitely do more women shows, and then women will feel more valued. And I think on some level that's true, but on another point, we do have to do the work of convincing each other first. And I think it's going to be this like generational shift, more so than just trying to like march up to the front door and protest. Like I think that's effective in some way, but I think what is more effective is like starting kind of within ourselves, and then using the creative communities around us to start to like spread those ideas forward. And I think in our creative circles as women, there are men. So if they are benefiting from these conversations, I think that's really positive, but I don't think I have to do the show for them, right? I don't know.
And we're not doing this, like separately. It's not just one singular moment where we're only creating women shows from here on out. It's part of a bigger picture. It's part of a bigger dialogue and a constant, consistent conversation we're having every day, so this is part of it. Creating a holistic approach, approaching people of power, including men, all of those things.
Do you feel like there's sufficient support from men in your workplaces, in your personal circles, towards your journey as a female creative?
I have a pretty brand new job, and it's actually mostly women.
Okay.
But I think the men that are here are extremely supportive.
That's great.
The owners of my company are women, but I have men that have the same position as I do, and I think everybody is just super supportive of each other. And but I have definitely had work situations where I felt like lesser than male colleagues, or I felt lesser than male, professors or museum directors or whatever. So I think it varies from place to place, I would say,
Like, my peers will validate me and, include me in shows, but when it comes to professors hiring a studio assistant, they're going to choose the guy over me. That's an example. So, again, like larger picture, if you see the world, we are there is progress, and there is, advancement, and, women are being more and more empowered to do this. But look at the demographics of the spaces of power. They're still so skewed. Until like those spaces of power reflect the demographics of our actual world, it's not enough. But I mean, that's just my opinion. But yeah, there's always room to grow and contribute, and men can always, contribute.
Yeah, actually, Ariel and Vanessa, you guys, we were clearing questions, and then what you said just sparked another one from Chris Dumas. He says, do you hope to reach a world where feminism is no longer a thing and society is fair and equal between men and women? And if yes, do you think there's a part of it that helps fuel creativity and motivation that will cause female creatives to drop off, or there'll be less of them wanting to get into it without a second purpose of pushing female rights?
I mean, feminism isn't just about like this equality. It's about, empowering ourselves, being, I feel like it's presumptuous to assume that, feminism is this one definition where we're trying to fight for like fair and equal between men and women. This question is so good because it just reflects, what feminism can be to some people and, what it means to be a feminist today. Right now, a lot of feminists are fighting for fair and equal, but for some some feminists, including me, I think I try to include, something that like goes beyond just this one aspect of being a woman. There is this aspect of not being paid equally. There's this aspect of not being able to walk alone at night sometimes because I'm, I'm in danger of being attacked. But it's also like, how can I better myself as a woman? What does it mean to be feminine as opposed to masculine? Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
This is gonna just sound really academic, so I'll just keep it like really short. But this is like the thing that I'm probably best at doing is like kind of like academic moment. And this is again like utopian sort of like academia thing, but like my understanding of feminism is that it is not a movement; it's a set of tactics that we can use. So it's a set of prescriptions and a set of ways to organize. And so the feminist movement, like an "I'm with her" thing or something, it's not that. It's just we can take feminist tactics and we can apply that to dealing with being undocumented or being whatever here, like whatever that looks like. The feminist movement really like laid the groundwork for a lot of these other movements around equality for marginalized people. And so it's really just a way that we can access tactics and prescriptions and all these things, right? So it's like, it doesn't have to be, okay, the movement is to get from here to here, and once we've achieved it, the movement is stop. It's not that. It's just we're using this knowledge to push everybody forward. Men, women, especially like men of color, still marginalized. We got to talk about that too. So like, I think feminist tactics can be used there. It's like, it's really just what we can do with it. And it's not that there's a goal and we just have to get here and then we move on, right?
Exactly.
All right. Sarah, go ahead.
I think one thing, there's a piece that Erin Riley had made, and it was like bloody tampon knit into like this woven tapestry. If men and women, like if let's say that happened, right? We're still gonna have our period. We're still gonna there's still gonna be art made about it. Like there's still gonna be intrinsic things that like make like there's men and female different, right? And there's not to say that couldn't be an all male show, for sure, go for it, but I think that there are certain aspects of being like, we're just angry now because like we're taxed, like they're like royalty taxes on tampons and like pads. It's so crazy, right? Like birth control, right? So crazy. But it's like we're making art about that, but let's say that there is no tax, let's say that they were free like condoms are or whatever, right? I think art would still be made about those things, right? So regardless, like it's kind of what Vanessa went back to, like it's not just about being equal, it's about getting to a place where we're talking about that without this like that presumption.
Yeah. Okay, I could honestly continue talking to you guys, but I think we have gone over time enough now. Thank you so much to each of you. On the screen right now are some places that the attendees can see more about you, follow you, find out what you're up to next. Do any of you guys want to plug something that you're doing right now? Something that's coming up? Okay. All right. I'm just going to explain MAEKAN one more time. This recording is going to be made available on maekan.com. And we have a wonderful feature with Sarah that tells more about the show as well on the site. So you can go listen to that. Thank you, all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Like this again.
I love you all very much.
10 out of 10.
You too. 10 out of 10.
Amazing. Wonderful.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.